The wide receiver room in New Orleans was rather underwhelming in preseason week 1 versus the Chargers. On top of that, they recently cut a player, and there's a guy who we all were hoping would break out this year who may have suffered a major injury. So I believe that the New Orleans Saints would benefit from adding some depth at the wide receiver position. So what are some options? In today's video, we're going to look at some free agents, going to look at some trade targets, and we're going to give you some insight on each one of these players. My name is Trizzy Trace Girouard. Thank you so much for tuning in to Saints Now by Chat Sports. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and all that other YouTube cliche stuff. Let's get into the injury news around Bub Means because this is notable. We don't have any major updates quite yet. And as soon as there is new information that has been reported, we will get y'all informed. But as of right now, Monday, August 11th, around 2:30 p.m. Central Time, there hasn't been any crazy updates. We do know that Bub Means was carted off the field, or carted off during the preseason game against the Chargers, and it's due to a lower leg issue. He is the biggest wide receiver that's on the roster, so missing this player and losing him due to injury, honestly, to me is a little bit concerning, considering there was already question marks and there's already a lack of size in the wide receiver group. There's a lot of speed, a lot of great route running, a lot of elusiveness, but there's not a lot of physicality and a lot of size in New Orleans right now outside of the tight end room. He is a player that I have said is going to be one of the biggest breakout candidates this year. I think he was going to flash for the New Orleans Saints offense. He's shown some really good moments throughout the summer. He had some good moments before dealing with injuries last year, and for what it's worth, I do think that Bub Means is a player that the Saints are going to miss out on. And in case you didn't see it, here's the picture. Bub Means, towel over his head, one cleat off, one cleat on. Not good. For what it's worth, this SoFi Stadium, this stadium that they played in yesterday, was also the stadium that Bub Means suffered an injury last year. So if it's me, I am not ever letting Bub Means step foot in SoFi Stadium again. But this doesn't stop just around Bub Means. Like we said, it was underwhelming in terms of the receiving department for the New Orleans Saints. Mason Tipton was a big star in my opinion. Kevin Austin Jr., he went 4 of 5 today. 42 yards, a long of 17, and he was a player that I think was fairly good, but again, these are the depth pieces. These are the guys that are going to be lower on the depth chart. You know the leaders are going to be Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, but when it comes to Mason Tipton and when it comes to Cedrick Wilson and Dante, Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr., I think that these are the guys that are most competing to be receivers 4, 5, and 6. They also cut a player. Like we mentioned, Nick Underhill reporting at halftime that the New Orleans Saints cut wide receiver Chris Tyree, which is absolutely savage to do in the middle of halftime. He did not participate in yesterday's game because he was dealing with an injury, and then the New Orleans Saints cut him due to an injury designation. So let's take an updated look at the wide receiver group for New Orleans because I want to add some context. I think it's important to make sure y'all are informed and know what's going on here. As we mentioned, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed are going to be the top 3 guys. But you have Kevin Austin Jr., Bub Means, who's dealing with an injury, Mason Tipton, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Cedrick Wilson, Dante Pettis, and Moochie Dixon, the wide receiver out of SMU, undrafted free agent. I'll tell you right now, I think this wide receiver group is okay, but I do think there's a lot left to be desired for New Orleans, which is why I'm going to tell you to subscribe to the channel because I believe a wide receiver could be coming into the mix fairly soon. So if a move happens, we're going to get you guys informed, and we're going to make a video on it here on the channel. So be sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications, and let's get to the free agent targets. First one, a name that a lot of people are very high on, Amari Cooper. For what it's worth, in case you forgot or you didn't know, Keenan Allen, he recently went back to the Los Angeles Chargers, so he's off the table. Amari Cooper, one of the next best options available in free agency right now. There's not a lot of great targets out there. There's not really a ton of interesting names. Amari Cooper, honestly, probably the most intriguing. He does have familiarity with Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier because they crossed paths with the Dallas Cowboys. 6'1", 211 pounds. He fits the size that the New Orleans Saints are seeking and quite frankly need in that wide receiver group. Last year, 44 catches, 547 yards, 4 touchdowns, almost 12 or over 12 yards per catch. I personally believe, although he is climbing the ladder in terms of age, 31 years old, I don't think he's lost too much of his step, but I do think that this is a player that you're not really expecting him to come in and be your wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. It's maybe 3 or 4. But at the end of the day, you need a player who has some size. And on top of that, he could be a nice veteran to have in the wide receiver group as well, alongside Brandon Cooks. Gabe Davis, a player that has actually visited with the New Orleans Saints. He's only 26 years old, and I did fact check that right before we filmed that. Me and Loco Lopez were sitting here talking like, hold on, wait, Gabe Davis, 26? There's no way. But yeah. Only 26 years old, born in 1999, which is absolutely crazy. 6'2", 225 pounds. This would be a really smart addition because of the youth that he can provide. He does have experience, and on top of that, he has really good size. He was drafted in the 4th round of 2020, or the 2020 NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills. He visited the New Orleans Saints early in June, but because of how things worked out and whenever he was cut, back in May, the team that signs him would only need to pay him a 1-year deal. It really probably wouldn't cost a ton of money, but he was released back in May due to an injury. He tore his meniscus in week 11 of the 2024 season. He's been recovering from that injury. He underwent surgery, was released after a failed physical designation because of that torn meniscus. And I'll say this, Gabe Davis, in my personal opinion, is the number 1 free agent target that the New Orleans Saints should look to sign because he can add size, he can add versatility, he can add good football play to a roster, which quite frankly needs some help. 183 catches over the course of his career, almost 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns. You can sign me up for that because I also think the Saints need to be very effective in the red zone. That's a place where they've struggled. They struggled a little bit there in the preseason game as well. So I want to see Gabe Davis rock some black and gold as long as the injury is cleared. Now, what would you do with Gabe Davis? Would you sign him? Would you pass on him? Get in the comment section, share your thoughts. I want you to put your GM hat on for me and let me know what you would do. And speaking of hats, we're going to talk about some fresh ones you got to cop later. Tyler Boyd, another free agent that is currently available. This one's a little bit of a less desirable option out of these 3, in my personal opinion. I do like the idea of Amari Cooper. Love the idea of Gabe Davis. Tyler Boyd, kind of, there's just, again, not a lot of great options out there in free agency right now. So he did spend most of his career with the Cincinnati Bengals, kind of was the wide receiver 3 behind T. Higgins, behind Jamar Chase, kind of got weeded out over time. Then he went over to the Tennessee Titans, played with them last season, 39 catches, 390 yards, no touchdowns on the season, but 6'2", 203 pounds. A big thing for him is that he is available. He has only missed 1 game or less per season since 2020. Multiple seasons where he's played all 17 games, multiple seasons where he's played all 16 out of 17. And the last time he missed 2 or more games was in 2020. So this is a player who's available. This is a player who the Saints could potentially lean on in an absolute pinch, and I don't think it would be bad depth. It's just not one that absolutely gets me juiced. Now, coming up, we're going to tell you guys about some trade targets, including the guy you probably saw in this thumbnail. I'm going to give you a hint. Terry McLaurin is going to get discussed. But before we get to that, I want to show you these brand new Saints hats that just dropped. I saw them online and I said, oh my God, I got to cop me one of these. So I went to chatsports.com/new Saints hat. I put it in the link and description of this, or I put the link in the comments and description of this video to make it easy for you to go get one. But guys, look how fresh these are. The new era Saints hats, pretty sick. I'm not going to lie. I think the colors work really, really well with the New Orleans Saints colors too. We got flat bills. We got trucker caps. We got baseball caps. Whatever you want, we got you covered. Chatsports.com/new Saints hat. Be sure to click the link in the comments and description of this video. Get yourself some new gear, and trust me, these are going to sell out quick. So do not waste any time. Go get yours today. Let's talk first about Scary Terry McLaurin. So, as we know, Terry McLaurin is in the midst of a hold-in because he is seeking a lot of dough. Right now, it's reported he's seeking $33-ish million per year. He wants to make top 10 wide receiver money, which the benchmark at that is $30 million per year, set by Tyreek Hill and Brandon Ayuk. But number 6 is A.J. Brown at $32 million per year. So, for Terry McLaurin, he probably wants to be right at or right above A.J. Brown. Garrett Wilson making $32.5, DK Metcalf at $33 million. He probably wants that little extra to make him top 5. I wouldn't blame him for wanting to do that. Very, very productive. I find it very hard to believe that a player who averaged 13.4 yards per catch will not be around next year. Jaden Daniels was a player that absolutely benefited from having Terry McLaurin on the field. And on top of that, you're not going to separate those two. That would just be so stupid if you're the Washington Commanders. But JP Finley did report, talking with Diana Rossini, everyone feels good that this is going to get done. Talking about the deal, it's just when and how they land there. Yes, he asked for a trade, but does anyone really think that Terry McLaurin wants to go somewhere else? No. So in my personal opinion, I don't disagree here. Why the hell would Terry McLaurin want to go anywhere else? Another thing that you have to consider is the money that you would owe Terry McLaurin. It just doesn't make sense for the New Orleans Saints, although it would be really, really cool. Two things can be true. One, I think it would be awesome to see Terry McLaurin in the black and gold. I think he'd be really, really good. And quite frankly, I think he would really add a big boost to this wide receiver group. But the other thing that can be true is it doesn't make any sense. And financially, it just doesn't work out, especially considering you have to pay Chris Olave, especially considering you're going to have to pay Rashid Shaheed, especially considering you have other guys on the roster you're going to have to add and pay and bring in and whatnot. So I think, in my opinion, I would just say no to trading for Terry McLaurin. It would be a really, really exciting addition, though. You can acknowledge that. Now, what would you do? I'm going to say no just because I don't think it makes sense financially. But what about you? Should the Saints trade for Terry McLaurin? Just give me a simple yes or no in the comment section. John Metchie, the former Alabama wide receiver. Hold on, I'm gonna do it. There you go. John Metchie, 24 years old. I mean, this guy's story really is so cool, and it's very unique. It's very heartwarming. Being diagnosed with leukemia, returning to football. That part, I want to say, awesome. It's an amazing story, and that alone is something that is an insanely awesome accomplishment. Now let's talk football. He just hasn't been very productive since returning in 2023. Has not had 500 total yards yet, only one touchdown over 2 seasons. The Texans have a lot of wide receiver talent. I know Tank Dell is hurt, but you have they traded for Christian Kirk. They have Stephon Diggs. They have Nico Collins. They have a lot of players in Houston. They have a lot of mouths to feed, and I just think John Metchie might be a player who's on the outside looking in terms of the reps and the usage there. He's entering the final year of his contract with Houston, so maybe this is a player who could end up getting traded, because I could see Houston saying, we're going to let him walk anyway. Maybe we get a little bit of value back in a draft pick. And look, there's no mystery whatsoever. Kellen Moore has not shied away from explaining why he praises adversity so much and why he values players who have bounced back after facing adversity so much. Kellen Moore loves players who have a chip on their shoulder. He loves players who have had to deal with something tough, have had to deal with a setback, have had to deal with whatever it is, but then tried to come out on top and succeeded in that regard. John Metchie, he was diagnosed with leukemia. He fought back, and he is now back on the football field. You're telling me Kellen Moore wouldn't eat that up? I'm not saying that you go and sign a player or you trade for a player based off of a good story, but I am saying that I think that this is a player that could fit kind of the type of player Kellen Moore wants, in terms of he's dealt with adversity, he's dealt with problems, and he has responded in a positive way. That has not been something that Kellen Moore has shied away from. He's been very, very adamant on life, you make mistakes. Football, you make mistakes. Life things happen. It's not about what happened. It's about how you bounced back and what you did after said thing happened. So I do think John Metchie could be an interesting target. Is it my number one option? No. But maybe one to consider. I think Kellen Moore would value John Metchie. Romeo Doubs is another wide receiver that the Saints could potentially trade for. There's actually a couple on the Green Bay Packers roster that maybe the Saints could kick the tires on, but let's focus in on the 25-year-old in Romeo Doubs entering the final year of his contract with the Green Bay Packers. A player who's been relatively productive for what it's worth since being drafted out of Nevada. 6'2", 204 pounds. He was a fourth-round pick. Over the course of his career, 235 catches, 1,700 yards, 15 touchdowns, over 11.5 yards per catch. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that this would be a bad addition because I actually think it might make some good impacts on the New Orleans Saints roster. I do think when it comes to Romeo Doubs, the Packers have decisions to make, and they can save some money if they move off of Doubs, but it does take two to tango. So the Saints and Kellen Moore, if they say, hey, that looks like a guy that we want, maybe that's a move that ends up happening. Not totally sure what a trade compensation would be for a player like Romeo Doubs, but I do think that it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to just see what it would cost, especially considering all of the hurdles that are currently being dealt with in New Orleans right now. For what it's worth, I want to emphasize one more point here. Do not forget that roster cuts are going to happen in a few weeks, and you're going to see players start getting cut. And when these teams get to the final 53-man rosters, there's always players that you're like, hold on, that was a surprise cut. Like, how did this guy get cut? Hold on, why did he get cut? What happened here? Like, there's things that happen every single year, and players that are very valuable, oftentimes become available because of roster cutdown days. So something just to keep in mind, something to think about. Some of these players might become available as free agents here in a few weeks, and then after that, you're going to have to re-explore potential trades. So I wanted to just kind of give you guys a few options: trades, free agency. Saints need a wide receiver, and I gave you 6 different players. If you are subscribed to Saints Now by Chat Sports, get down in the comment section, type Golden Gang. And if you aren't and you subscribe on this video, type it's my first video. Just let me know that this is your first video, that you just subscribed, so that way I can show you a little bit of extra love and maybe give you a shout out on a future video. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Y'all stay golden, and we'll see you next time.